is good, people? Izzy Max here, back for week 3 of the Blue Breakdown, and as always, I am joined by Matt. How you doing, bub?
Hello, sir. I'm doing quite well.
If you look on the screen, these are the mons that did well, so we'll kind of talk about them other than the Togekiss, and that is for a specific reason. First up, we have Hector and Gumi. If you look at the set, if you look at the differential, how it finished, and everything that was talked about this set, it looked like a hell of a game. If you could watch it, this was a headache to watch. We're not going to have too much to say. We have the stats. It looked like Togekiss kind of just crit everything and won. The set did go to 3, but it was very hard to watch. Game 1 is only from Gumi's side, and it stopped almost in the middle of the game. And we didn't get to see some things that got killed, what killed what. And then Hector had game 2 and 3. Game 3, you could watch. Watch the end of the game. But game 2 was choppy, and I don't think ended at the end of the game or didn't start at the start. I don't know. Just know Togekiss kind of crit everything once Hector realized, hey, I can just do this. Matt is going to have a little bit more. He did kind of dive into the teams a little bit more to have something to say, but if you can watch it, go for it. It seems like a really good match, but it was just incredibly hard to actually do under time constraints. So, Matt, why don't you go ahead and give me what you got?
Yeah, I've got a bit more, not too much, but this was just kind of like the perfect storm of both players having recording issues at the same time. So you can't blame anybody for that. It's just we've got some pieces of the match. We've got enough to kind of figure out what happens. Sometimes that happens. It's good enough. Yeah, it was pretty much. I think the game 1 was pretty solid for Gumi. I felt like the main max option for Hector was the Hydreigon, and it went down way too early without maxing, and then Hector was stuck with this kind of awkward Darmanitan max, which was not Zen mode. So that was a little bit weird, and Gumi ended up taking it. Hector, I talked to Hector before the match, and we kind of talked about the matchup and what he was running a little bit, and I know that his main mode seemed to be the Crit Kiss. And so once he switched over to that in game 2, he kind of just ran away with the rest of the set. Like you said, Togekiss just went in and sort of crit everything. I think it had a pretty good matchup, and he had a pretty good mode with it next to either one of his redirectors, especially with Comfy in the back with Tailwind, which is really cool. So I think this is something I've noticed about Hector, both in draft and in regular VGC. When he sticks to his flowchart, his game plan, what he planned to do, he does quite well. And I've seen other situations where he doesn't, and things tend to fall apart a little bit. And I think that's what we saw in game 1. That wasn't the Darmanitan Hydreigon lead wasn't quite what he was planning on as his main mode. But once he switched over to the Togekiss, things went much better for him. And he kind of just swept. I think the Togekiss, the Crit Kiss in particular, had a really nice matchup. I think it was able to crit through a max bug special attack drop at some point. It just kind of blew through Gumi's team in game 2 and 3. As far as Gumi's prep, there were a couple of things I actually really liked. The Grassy Seed on the Tornadus was really cool. Making sure he's got his bases covered against that Darmanitan, because god damn, that thing hits hard. And then I also noticed we saw the Rock Tomb come out of the Runerigus, and we also saw in team preview that he had weakness policy on his Volcanion. So I think that was a really interesting trick room combination from his side as well. So that's about all I've got for this match.
One thing that I kind of do just want to pick Gumi's brain if he's watching this, just kind of answer me in the chat. Hector's team really does focus around this Togekiss, and Darmanitan is a big enough offensive presence to warrant prepping. 4 of your 6 mons are weak to Darmanitan. I just kind of wonder about that one. I get it, you're trying to counter that Blastoise, which is so bulky and you need grass coverage, but I don't know, just want to pick your brain on that one. Just kind of puzzled me a bit. Like I said, I didn't really watch the match. I tried. I really couldn't. I got more frustrated than anything.
I feel you.
But yeah, just 4 mons weak to Darmanitan. Struck me a little weird, but Tornadus is quick as hell and gets steel coverage. So anyway, moving on. Flame on. Here you go, Matt.
All right. Well, here we've got Burst and Toxic this week. I think in Burst's commentary, he mentioned that he had a pretty serious matchup problem, which I think I agree with. Toxic seems to have an edge here, and Burst just wasn't really able to come up with a decent solution to what Toxic's team does. Toxic, a lot of his stuff seemed pretty standard-ish. There's some cool bits of prep on his side that I will touch on in a few moments. But it was pretty much just Burst tried this slow Glastrier mode without Trick Room. You can see Glastrier and Copperaja here, both without a Trick Room setter in the Aromatisse, which I find a little bit questionable. If you want one and you think it has a good matchup even outside of Trick Room, or a workable matchup rather, that's fair. I think bringing both of them outside of Trick Room is pretty questionable. But yeah, he went in with this slow Glastrier mode, and Toxic's team just kind of did what Toxic's team does. And he Burst didn't really look like he was able to do too much about it. The games were decided rather quickly as well. In game 1, it was pretty. Burst decided not to Dynamax the horse on the first turn, and just ended up losing way too much HP. Even though he got a Snarl off with the Manectric, the double expanding force just ended up doing way too much damage to the non-Dynamax Glastrier, and considering that he just had I think he brought Manectric, Politoed, and Magmar in that match. Pretty much all of his Dynamax and his offensive eggs were going into the Glastrier basket, right? And losing that much health was just kind of sort of game ending for him. It was really not great. And then game 2 was decided maybe even earlier, because I don't think Burst had anything to deal with the Liepard set that Toxic brought here, which is, I think, my favorite bit of prep from him. I think the Screech was great with the Zapdos. It was also great with the Liepard's own Foul Play. Really, really cool combo there, as well as the Sunny Day. Prankster Sunny Day or Prankster Rain Dance, whatever, depending on what weather you're going up against, is always great tech to have. And he actually went with that over the Thunder Wave, which Burst was actually trying to counter with his Lumberry on the Kingdra, which I actually thought was a bit of good prep, but Toxic sort of out-prepped him there. And I think the last move that Toxic had on the Liepard was Charm. I believe, I think we saw that on his pace, but I don't think he actually clicked it in battle. Also a very good move against Glastrier. So this Manectric Glastrier combination that Burst had, just there just wasn't enough good support for the Glastrier. He just kind of let Toxic do what Toxic's team does to him. It was kind of just Snarl support versus a Psy Spam mode, and I didn't really see much else that the Manectric was offering there. There was very little in the way of offensive support. There wasn't really anything to help boost the Glastrier. if there was a Choppleberry instead of something like a Life Orb or a Weakness policy. There was no boosting move like a Swords Dance on Glastrier. There was not even a Max Knuckles, something like that. It's hard for Glastrier to get going a lot of the time, as powerful as it is, when you're just relying on chilling Nay to snowball forward, and he just really didn't have the offensive power to muscle through Toxic's team, and didn't have the support to let Glastrier do what Glastrier usually wants to do. I think in a situation like this, I would have liked to see Burst dig a little deeper into his options and form a more cohesive mode. I realize he had a matchup problem, but I think he does have options here that can actually work against Toxic's team. His Trick Room mode is decent. His Rain mode is decent. You can lean into those and add some techs for the things that Toxic has to counter those modes, because obviously he has stuff like Sunny Day Lightheart for Rain. He's got Escavalier for your Trick Room mode. But I think there are some ways around that, so I would have liked to see maybe something more like that. Maybe there's something else in his draft that he could have leaned on a little bit more. Those are just a couple of ideas off the top of my head, but I think a little bit more creativity was probably called for here, seeing the way that things played out.
Now, question: since it was available for this match, if you seen the Ferrothorn instead of the Copperajah, would you be more okay with that?
Yeah, I think so. Because Toxic's fire coverage tends to be
Heat Wave,
fairly limited. Yeah, it's kind of just. I mean, he's got Heat Wave on Necrozma, which he did bring. Diggersby, Fire Punch, maybe one other Mystical Fire, Indeedee, I guess.
But you have a rain option.
Right. So it's gonna require some. That would require some good play on Versus' part. It would be a tough matchup considering that Toxic was also bringing Sunny Day on the light part. I don't think that's like an easy answer, but it could be a much better bring than let's say the Copperajah. I think I would have liked that a little bit more.
Remind me, does Burst have a dark type?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember.
Okay. Probably should have came if you had one. Don't know if you do. Sorry.
No, he doesn't.
Okay. So, yeah, that sucks. That makes the matchup a lot harder. But in defense, the Manectric, I actually do like. So, if it was bulky enough to snarl and live the double Psy, I don't think it is. I've ran a Manectric before. It's not that bulky. I do like the snarl. Also, another lead that Burst has used quite a lot is the Zapdos Indeedee. So, Manectric can kind of do some stuff against that as well with the electric coverage. Of course, you do have to deal with the Indeedee. But overall, Manectric, I like in the matchup. Not so much where it was used, but like I understand it.
Yeah.
I'm just with you. If this Copperajah was anything that could deal, maybe is faster than the Psy mode that Toxic has, or not really. I don't really have his team off the top of my head. But I don't know. Just yes, in the pregame, me and Dan already said this is a rough matchup for Burst. It could have just maybe a little bit better. I do give props to the Manectric. I've used it before. It's decently hard to use, but in what you were using it for, I do appreciate it, and I really like it. But it was a hard matchup. Honestly, why is it +3, -4? I don't remember what happened.
That I don't remember.
I don't either.
You know what it was? I believe the Manectric lived on its sash and then died to Glastier's Hail.
Okay, that makes more sense. This is one of those games that got played decently early and just kind of got put in the back of my mind. But again, we thought it would be a hard matchup. It was, honestly, just technically losing by 4. You I guess you did all right. But, you know, we said it would be a hard matchup, and it was. Next up... Oh, it's you again. Here you go.
All right, so this will be Maxwell versus Dark. This one was interesting going in because I was made aware of your game plan prior to the battle, and it was kind of nutty, to say the least.
Fast Melmetal, baby.
Yeah. So it was. I think that's. I'll start here. I think that's a good bring against Dark because his team is not terribly fast, and also doesn't really have great speed control. So in this matchup, that allowed you to get away with that, whereas in most matchups, I don't think you could. So that was good on you for identifying that this was the place to use that. So I think that that mode combined with, because any reliable tailwind that's faster than what Dark has with like a big heavy hitter is going to do really well into his team, and that's exactly what this was. Because if I'm remembering correctly, if we're just going by base speed, I think Victini is actually the fastest thing on his team. Which, base 100 is respectable, but it's not where you want your ceiling to be.
Outside of a proc Slurpuff, yeah, that's all I had to outspeed.
Right, yeah. So, like I said, that was good of you to identify that. And Melmetal still has pretty substantial bulk, even if you're not investing in it. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were able to go Adamant still on the Melmetal to just outspeed the Victini. You didn't have to go Jolly.
Yes, it was Adamant 236, 234, something like that. It wasn't 252.
Okay. Right, just enough to outspeed Jolly Victini, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice that you were able to keep the Adamant there. So anyway, I think that matchup that you had with your mode, combined with some of the ways that Dark was playing in the early game, I think in game 1 and 2, really just allowed you to kind of roll over him. And it didn't really look like you were rolling over him. Usually when you think about like a real steamroll, you think, oh, somebody maxes turn 1 or turn 2 and just blows things up every single turn. This was more like, I felt really strange about the way that Dark was playing his Squirtle, because it kind of seemed like every time you had Salazzle out and you were able to Sludge Bomb into Milotic, he just kind of let you do it with not really getting anything in return. And then I also noticed, at least in game 1, once the Milotic went down and he brought in Urshifu, and then you had Heat Wave, a decent spread move to actually hit the Urshifu, then he started redirecting, which seemed really weird. So it sort of felt like he was just losing resources for not a very good reason, and he wasn't forcing you to lose resources at the same rate. And then in the late game, Melmetal was able to just come in and blow shit up. So
yeah, real quick, he was also having to redirect the Moonblast, to be fair.
Right. Yeah. I guess it was a little bit more questionable with the Milotic, because I know that I noticed he did that in both games with when he had Squirtle Milotic out.
Yeah, I really think his Squirtle was honestly his main form of speed control with the Icy Wind.
Yeah, it just wasn't enough.
No. Go ahead, continue. Sorry.
Oh, that's all I have on that. I mean, his speed control options are just very limited. Like a Tailwind out of the Corviknight would be nice, but it's rough when your Tailwind is that slow.
Yeah. So going into this matchup, I realized that as I don't use Salazzle, and it probably won't get used much, just because of what it is, it actually matched up decently well as a lead. And it's not even Focus Sash, and it was able to live some important hits. But Fake Out, Poison, Fire, Stab really just kind of hits everything for at least neutral. As you can see, it hits everything for at least neutral. I think except the Victini, but oh well.
Well, Poison hits it fine.
Psychic doesn't resist Poison?
Nope.
Oh, okay. See how much I know. Anyway, the Rabambi. This is the first time it came, and of course, you have a dark Urshifu. You gotta expect it, but I don't think he really expected how I brought it. And I'm surprised you didn't bring it up to roast me, but I know. Shout out to Dina. Also thought the same way I did. Speed swap on Rabambi. I almost threw game 2. Because I speed swapped the Urshifu when I should have either A, attacked, which was kind of stupid, or B, just speed swapped my Melmetal. But I thought the drops from Icy Wind went with it. To where Matt was telling me also Dina thought like the boost from Surge Surfer went with it. Which honestly, makes sense.
Yes, but she never made that mistake in a match.
I also don't mock, which I should. I honestly should, but I don't.
Oh, I know.
I don't have time.
I'm just poking fun.
But
yeah, that's an important thing to know about Speed Swap if you're planning on using it. It just swaps that raw number.
Raw
just the number that you see
124
on
base
your,
speed.
Not even the base, just the number that you see on your summary screen.
Oh, I'm just saying I have base 124. So that's really, really good. Second fastest speed swapper in the game. Other than that, one play that I don't fault him for that I think was just good prep on my end, not tooting my own horn. I never clicked follow me on the Electivire until I had to. So all he seen was Wild Charge and Protect for the longest time. And then he gets to a position where he actually has really good offenses into what's on the field. And I just follow me and then destroy whatever was there doing most of the damage offensively on his side. And he told me, he's like, once I seen Wild Charge, Protect, and how much you were doing, I didn't expect follow me. So, that makes sense, but I just think that's honestly why Electivire is honestly low-key MVP of my team.
Yeah, it's definitely a solid redirector, but like I think this, since you mentioned that, I guess this is just kind of a PSA to anybody going up against really any mon that has follow me, whether you think it's going to be offensive or not. Never discount the possibility of redirection. Yeah, I've seen, in like early VGC 2020, we've seen plenty of very offensive Togekiss, like crit Togekiss sets that still run follow me.
Yeah, and in Collinsville, I had follow me, Heat Wave, Dazzling Gleam, Air Slash with the crit item.
Yeah, that kind of thing was very common, and for good reason. It gives your team a lot more
versatility,
a lot more flexibility. Yeah, exactly. So even if you think it's a more offensive variant, even if you know it's a more offensive variant, unless you know the full moveset, you gotta play assuming that follow me is probably on there.
Also, I did. I have to say it. I broke a promise to you, Matt. If you looked at my set, you seen Scarf Pelipper. There was a move on Scarf Pelipper that I told Matt I was gonna click. It was Twister. So Matt,
okay,
I apologize.
Next slide.
I apologize. Real quick, it hits double targets with a chance to flinch like 20% or something like that. It was just funny. But then, Band and Mamoswine, both of those didn't get to come. But yeah, all right, here we go. Next one, Anthony and Tay. I think we both have decent amount of stuff for this. I kind of did a funny look at the Zoroark. Ha ha ha. Anyway, I think Tay really just broke the glass on what he is capable of. I know he was struggling for the first 2 weeks. But if you're able to watch this game, Tay really played like the Tay I know he can be. He positioned himself really, really well. He knew what he needed to do, what mons he needed to use. Yes, I know you don't like the Jirachi, but it was there for, honestly, just the Zoroark. Because you're not firing off, like, whatever. The Zoroark is the only reason Jirachi was what it was. But, man, Tay played really, really well. And I'm honestly proud of him. Like, Anthony, top-rate player. Nobody can question that. And for Tay to win, kind of like he did, I know there was a crit, but honestly, it was a 3-0, and Anthony didn't take a game, so weigh your eggs where you want them. Tay played phenomenally, and just good on him. I think what he brought was super smart. He prepped incredibly well. And I think you're going to talk a little bit more about it. This was kind of a down week for Anthony prep-wise. His Trick Room mode was kind of weird. But why don't you go ahead and take us through that? I've kind of boasted on my boy a little bit too much, so go ahead.
Yeah, he was kind of telling me that after the match, he didn't think he prepped all that well, and the Halucha pickup was something that he was definitely concerned about going into the match. So, I think you're right. I think it was a little bit of an off week, so I wouldn't expect this kind of thing to be the norm with him. We've seen very good matches from him so far prior to this week, so. I think those two are more emblematic of what he's like as a player. But yeah, I think Tay he knew the matchup well. I think he prepped well. The Scarf Zora work turned out to be really nice. And I think this week was kind of just a matter of maxing the Finny and just taking hits, doing damage, and just very simply maintaining that, because the Finny had a pretty decent defensive and offensive matchup here. The main thing on Anthony's squad that's able to threaten it is the Venusaur, like you guys mentioned, I think in the pregame show, but also, like you mentioned, there's a shit ton of stuff that Tay has that really threatens Venusaur. So
he also had Rendo Ice Beam on Finny.
Right. So, to be honest with you, I actually kind of thought that Rindo was maybe more for the Colossal than Venusaur.
It does both, man.
As strange as that sounds. Yeah, it's but I think it was good of Tay to know what exactly is going to be his strength here. He prepped well. His mode was correct, I think. So. Good on Tay for
that. One thing I do want to bring up that didn't get to be brought because Trick Room didn't come till game 2, and Tay did a phenomenal job of kind of stopgapping and wasting those Trick Room turns. The Beware was room service. Does that get slow enough to go under Trick Room Colossal?
Colossal, no, but Diancie, yes.
I know, sure. Okay, because it had Close Combat and Iron Head. I'm guessing it was there for said Trick Room mode.
Gotcha. Yeah, I also noticed. I noticed on the pace that it was fluffy. So maybe Trick Room Colossal would have actually been the play here, since Beware is basically weak to fire.
Yeah.
But that might have been an interesting bring. I know that Anthony was he definitely wanted a Trick Room option here because. Tay's team does not look very Trick Room heavy. It looks like a variety of different Trick Room modes can end up doing pretty well into him.
Yeah, so Tay's bulk is his Trick Room answer. That's about it.
Yeah, and that can be a legitimate option. I mean, I sort of had the same thing going on for a lot of the time last season myself. So it's a legitimate way to go, but. Some Trick Room modes are definitely going to have an easier time into him because of that. So it has its weaknesses and its strengths. But I think part of the problem with Anthony's Trick Room mode was that he didn't have a full Trick Room mode here, and was kind of forced to bring one of his fast options in the back with alongside the Diancie, Riolu, and the Scizor. And that ended up being the Barraskewda, and the Barraskewda didn't end up doing anything.
Switched into
because it was caught in Trick Room, right? So that was sort of a weakness of his mode there. Probably not the best bit of prep on his end.
Now,
Tay...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
Okay. Good. I was rewatching this match actually just this morning. How big was the crit? Because wouldn't it still have been a 2-shot with the Dazzling Gleam?
Yeah, but I think
in the grand scheme of things, like, it probably wouldn't have ended at a 3-0, maybe like a 2 or a 1-0, I still think Tay might have won based on how much damage that did. Because then the Finny, isn't really hitting anything else, and the the Dragapult doesn't die to just a random Scarf Snarl.
Right.
But it was still a 2-shot.
It probably was, yeah. Maybe.
Just seeing how low it dropped it to where it was in a Snarl range,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. The Dragapult would have, if it was able to live another turn, would have been able to do a pretty significant amount of damage as well after that, and it might have even lived for all 3 of its max turns as well. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened in the battle, because if Riolu maybe redirected, took another, let's say the Snarl breaks its sash, and then
the Finny would have killed
Finny
it with a
kills
Moonblast, but then you still have the half-health Dragapult. Yeah.
Well, the Dragapult would get to kill something that turn, because it actually gets to attack, so...
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if it cost the game just based on damage.
I think it's decently likely that it did, but it's all obviously hard to say. And like you mentioned, if there's if somebody wins a set 2-0 and one of the games happens to have a bit of luck that pushes them forward, it's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit unfortunate that RNG plays out that way sometimes. But when it's only one game and it ends in a 2-0, yeah, it's definitely harder to say that, this game was decided by RNG or something like that. So when the losing side is unable to pick up a game there, so
for sure. Still, again, I hope Tay continues to play like this. Again, he's playing me next week, so maybe take a week off. But like, if he plays like this, he'll bounce back. So that's gonna do it for us. Matt, any final words?
No, I think that'll do it for me.
All right, let's have less weird recordings, and yeah, I think games next week are going to be crazy anyway. Me and Dan have already recorded the pregame, and the matchups are looking really weird. So.
Oh, you know what? We also have. We're not doing our usual breakdowns next week. We're doing.
Next week is our first power ranking. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, look forward to that. That's going to be interesting. So. We'll see you in the next one, y'all. Peace.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan, and I am joined as always by Ryan, and we are here for the Week 3 Red Division breakdown. How's it going, Ryan?
Going good. This week was a pretty interesting week for the Red Division. We have decided to go for the format of putting Pokemon of random types on our front page. This week was Ghost Week. There was a lot of ghost types in play this week. That was the recurring theme of Red Division this week, was all the ghosts came out. A challenge for Red Division is to have a week so good that we put fire type Pokemon on the front. But I'm only going to do that if we really kill it. We are trying some new format stuff this time, so any feedback is good. But we're feeling a lot more confident and happy with this. To me, at least, it feels a lot more in line with how I think Dan and I want to kind of do these. So, without too much further ado, we can just kind of jump into the first match.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So the first match we're covering is Charles versus Ryan, which ended up with 0 differential, but a win for Charles and a loss for Ryan. So looking at the teams, I know you were the one playing in this match. Is there anything on Charles's team that you'd think is unexpected or you didn't expect to see coming into it, just team sheet-wise, not necessarily prep-wise?
Yeah, team sheet-wise, no. This was very in line with what I thought his 6 would be. I actually think they're pretty much the correct 6 too. Mm-hmm. It was the 6 that gave me the most trouble when I was prepping, and the 6 that I kind of focused the most on in prep. I think those were very solid options into my squad. So
yeah, and I would say for you as well, that's probably the correct 6. Maybe the Coffagrigus came as a bit of a surprise, but he knew he was getting Celesteela, Nidoking, Arcanine at the very least, and probably Azumarill. But moving into the match itself, so the first note I have is obviously it was a 3-game set. Each game was very close, but the end games of both were favored for Charles, especially because your Koffagrigus didn't have a good way to hit the Lele, and he liked preserving the Lele for the end game. Charles maxed the Nidoqueen game 1 and then the Drifblim games 2 and 3, which was interesting because the Nidoqueen, it didn't attack, it never attacked, did it? Like,
Nidoqueen?
You just killed it the turn it maxed, or...
No, I didn't. I didn't quite OHKO it. It did attack my Steela. It actually would have killed Steela, but I was AV with a ton of bulk.
Okay.
So
okay.
I lived the hit. Otherwise, it would have KO'd.
Yeah,
but I also got to move first because my Steela was slower in Trick Room, and I did like 90% or something with my attack. So,
yeah, I think that was a very, very interesting match counterplay there. Like, Charles had a very standard 6 Pokemon, but his sets were not standard. Like, the Max Drifblim with the Absorb Bulb, the Max Weakness Policy Nidoqueen were both interesting options, but neither of them had substantial output in the turns when he maxed them, because the Nidoqueen went down pretty quickly, and then the Drifblim didn't always have the Absorb Bulb proc right away, and he was using it more for stat drops, which... It might be surprising for you to note that a +1 Genesect will just
with
kill a -3 Celesteela with a Blaze Kick.
That will. I'm pretty mad at Celesteela for that, honestly. What a terrible Pokemon.
But I thought Charles's game plan of his max being more stat manipulation for late game Genesect to make sure it got the boost that he wanted was a unique plan. I don't know how often it works, but it did very well into what you were doing, because it was a decent way to answer the Celesteela to stop it from going too crazy in the late game. So it was very... I really liked the way that he prepped and decided to play that, even if I don't know how often that works. But the pivot to Lele for the late game in games 2 and 3 was obviously huge for him, because your team didn't really have an answer to that with the Raichu set that you were running to survive the triple axle instead of being able to outspeed the Lele. But the one critique I would have for Charles this week, or I guess not the one critique, but the main one, is that the Nidoqueen set was really cool, but I don't know if it was actually good this week. Maybe it was just because you ran AV Steela that it wasn't as good, but that would have been a set that I think would have been very cool to preserve for a week when it was more likely to pick up an OHKO on a Troublesomon, although I guess launching a Max Lightning off of a surprise weakness policy Nidoqueen is always going to hurt the Celesteela, and your AV call was just great there. But do you have any major thoughts about this match?
Yeah, a couple. I will say, just in regards to the Nidoqueen, I think it works well just in the sense of that Nidoqueen and Nidoking are not mons that people expect to max, so that can give them an advantage when they do max, because they actually do have the attacking stats to max pretty well. I actually, at one point, in my early prepping phases, was looking at like maybe a max Nidoking into him, actually, because they're mons that you don't expect to max, they can sometimes kind of get that damage output off. That said, though, the main issue you run into is that in the damage calculator, a Sheer Force Nidoqueen unmaxed doing attacks compared to a Dynamaxed one even at +2 are going to be extremely similar calcs. You don't actually get a ton even at +2 compared to like your fully invested Sheer Force Life Orb. You know, they actually kind of, the math there is very similar. Otherwise, his Drifblim Burr, the Absorb Bulb was so cool. That was such a really neat thing. I like that he had a double proc for it too. He was able to proc it with both the Blastoise and the Audino, potentially. And it was a really good way to get the Unburden boost off on the Drifblim. Not that the speed particularly mattered, but it was cool. Lele was solid. Really good bring on his end. I think his game plan for game 2 was a really great pivot. I felt pretty good at the end of game 1. And he really, really got me to game 2. His pivot and his planning for that game 2 was really solid. I think his end games were generally very solid. And also, Focus Sash Genesect was 100% the play into my team. It was one of those things where I was calcing Akaberry Genesect, and I have so much fire coverage on my team potentially that like I KO'd through Aka with most things. Like if I was running like Nidoking Fire Punch, if he runs Aka, will still KO unless he's built this way. And Heat Wave from Arcanine still Okos if he's built this way. By having that Sash to guarantee he gets 2 turns off with the Genesect, I think that was very correct into me, and I actually wasn't that worried about the drives. Because the thing is that if you're on a drive, you have to be a special Genesect, and I had an AV Celesteela this week, specifically because if he went the drive route, I would just be like, oh, okay. Because Physical was actually the one I was more concerned with. So I definitely think that he really prepped and played this one pretty well. So huge shout-outs, and good game. I think this might have been the best set of the week from Red Division. I'm not sure, though.
Yeah, you always think your sets are the best set of the week from Red Division.
I do, but I actually think that's been true 2 weeks in a row. But we'll see.
Right. Oh, and to mention, we also have our Mon of the Week category. Do you want to explain what that is, since it's going to be at the bottom of the
so originally it was like MVP of the week, but that's not really what we wanted, because sometimes this isn't about the Mon that's an MVP. It's like the Mon that after the game sticks out in your head the most. So sometimes it is the Mon that like does the most work. Like for me, it was Celesteela. For Charles, it was the Drifblim, because even though the Drifblim like didn't do as much Game 3 and was more a Game 2 player, like an Absorb Bolt Drifblim is going to stick in my head long after I haven't played this set, So Mon of the Week is just kind of like, for that game, here were the things that stuck out in the memory, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we vote kind of together on these.
Yeah.
As well. So, yep, there we go.
All right, well, let's move on into the next match, and you can go ahead and break this one down because it's me versus Jess.
Yeah, so this was a pretty interesting set. So we see the Rotom... So, to me, these are both pretty, like, what I'd expect to see teams into each other. I really like the Urshifu on Jess's side. Like, just on paper, that was a Mon that looked pretty good into, like, Kyurem, and it does good work into some other stuff. But you have some nice answers for it with the Rotom and the Gourgeist, and having 2 Ghost types, because that's still Valley Ghost this week, if I remember correctly.
3.
Oh, 3, yeah. Because Gourgeist is also a Ghost type. So you have good tech answers to that close combat, which is good. And then meanwhile, this is Ghost Week after all. Meanwhile, on Jess's side, this is... I wouldn't call it her core team, because she like just got the Urshifu, but we've seen a lot of the Togetic, Mimikyu, Snorlax, Mew, Moltres. Like, those have come already quite a bit, even just 3 weeks in. I feel like those are Mons that she's gravitating towards in her prep, so not a huge shocker to see those Mons on the field. So we can go ahead and move on.
Yeah, I would agree. These are the exact 6 that I expected from Jess.
Yeah. But I want to talk about some things with this game. So the Weakness Policy Gourgeist was a really solid Game 1 option, specifically for a Game 1. Because a Mon like Gourgeist, to me, if I see a Gourgeist on the field, and I'm playing someone like Jess where she has a really, really strong TR mode, I'm like, oh, that Gourgeist is how he stops TR. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it's like more supportive set, and that thing maxes in just Oko's Moltres, and then that's such a good back foot for a Game 1. It really gave you that early advantage that you needed. The Weakness Policy didn't even activate until near the end of the game. But the fact that was able to put on so much pressure, because Gourgeist is a support Mon that also has acceptable attacking stats and was able to hit her team very hard with good super effective coverage, was, I think, really good for a Game 1 situation. Like, I feel like if you had whipped that out in like a Game 3, it might not have, like, a theoretical Game 3. That kind of thing doesn't work, but sometimes with Game 1, like, if you can get a really good counterplay turn 1 right off the bat, that can really put your foot on. I really liked the Max Phantasm on the Kyurem this week. I think that was a really good tech option, and it paid off extremely well in Game 2. I also really want to compliment Jess's adjustments for the Game 2. So instead of trying to repeat that Game 1 event, where she probably was thinking, okay, like, he just did this weird Gourgeist thing, he's probably going to do it again, which you didn't do. But she led with I believe it was the Mew Mimikyu, and I was like, yeah, that's a really good kind of restrictive lead on that sort of thing. And that's also cool too, because she's already revealed the Mew being Life Orb special after Game 1. So to me, that was a way for you to kind of like not let Dan prep for Mew in the back. That was a way that kind of front loaded the Mew. So that was cool. But overall, I mean, Dan, you felt pretty in control this set. Like, Jess definitely had, I never really felt like Jess was misplaying any of her turns. I just felt like you had like a pretty solid handle on the flow of the matchup. You knew what you could live, what you couldn't. You made a couple good reads. You made a couple good reads in game 2 too that I think, had you not made those reads, would have been much, much more difficult for you. And the other thing, and this is actually something I've kind of noticed with Jess's team on occasion, it didn't feel like there was enough immediate offense to stop you. Like, it felt like, yes, you have stuff that has attacking stats like Moltres on this team and things like that, and Urshifu, but it was kind of weird because both games I was sitting there like, Jess doesn't really threaten to like OHKO anything on the field right now, and I felt that way a little bit both games, which was something I was not expecting to think. So that's just kind of an odd quirk. I don't know if that's going to be a continuous thing with her team, but it was definitely felt that way throughout this set, even if that's maybe not true on paper or in theory. So I'm going to let you kind of talk through your own notes for this game, and then I do have a comment on one of your notes because I do disagree with it.
Yeah, so the first note, which might be the one you disagree with, is that Nasty Plot Mew is more of a defensive or without Nasty Plot, Mew is more of a defensive option than a high output option. I think that actually goes with what you were saying about the immediate offenses, and that's something I'm noticing with a lot of the base 100 mythicals. When you've got base 100s all around, you think that's probably evenly offensive and defensive, but they are substantially bulkier, especially with Dynamax, but their output actually isn't great unless you're able to boost them up. And that's something that I noticed with Jess's Mew, is that if she's not getting that Nasty Plot off, even though it's Life Orb Max, it's not OHKOing anything on my team in Max, and even a lot of my things outside of Max, it's not getting the KO on with its max attacks. So it's giving me extra turns of offense that I shouldn't necessarily be getting. The Gourgeist, I did think was very, very good, specifically into Jess's tier 1 options, because one, as a potential defensive pivot, because it's got 122 base defenses, even if Urshifu is using its crit move, Surging Strikes, I'm resisting it with that, so I'm not really feeling awful as a defensive pivot. And two, its offenses, it can hit both of them for stab super effective damage. So I thought the Gourgeist as a game 1 option was just very good. Just did have the tools for it, because you can EV a Moltres in such a way that it survives the max rock fall if I'm not triggering weakness policy, even without the Rock Berry, if you max the Moltres. Or if you have the Rock Berry, you're going to survive that as well. So there are some potential issues for me there, but otherwise I thought Gourgeist just looked like it was good this week, even though it's not what the sets that it normally runs. And for a third one, I just think Kyurem by itself is very, very strong and very difficult to go up against, which is why I have that note. And then I just have the Peter Pumpkin Eater rhyme there. But what are your notes here?
Yeah, I do agree that some of the base 100 mons do fail to get those calcs, but at the same time, I feel like it's maybe overstated that I feel like there are some people who are like, they're just not good max options. And like, I kind of disagree with that, because if you look at, for example, my Celesteela, which is doing fine, that thing's only base 107. So it's only 7 points higher than a base 100, you know? And that thing is actually doing pretty well and getting what I need it to. Part of the reason for that is that I like clicking Helping Hand, because if you click Helping Hand, those base 100s, like a modest Life Orb base 100 Mew, if Jess had some way to boost that damage with like a Helping Hand, all of a sudden OHKO's basically everything in the game.
Right.
You know, if you're hitting it super effectively. So I actually think those kind of mons are fine. I just think that like, if you're gonna run a 3-attack mythical, I do think that you either need a Helping Hand support, or you need like a Leer, or you need a Fake Tears. You need a little something. It doesn't have to be too much, but you need something to kind of put it over that edge a little bit, because otherwise it's not gonna be. I do think it's being a bit overstated, though. I think 3-attack protect mythicals are actually very good. if you can give them some of the proper support they need, which I'm not actually saying Jess under-supported her Mew here. I think having Mew next to Mimikyu is actually going to consistently be very good. It was just bad this week. And actually, Mimikyu, I think, was her best Mon this week. I think it gave you the most trouble, too. You had to really play around Mimikyu. And part of that is that Disguise is so strong.
Yes.
And especially in a max format, and she's so good at using that thing. I mean, Jess has like 3 whole seasons of experience with Mimikyu. To me, it felt like the thing that was the most likely thing to end your momentum at any given point. Like, it felt, and I think you made a really smart call by saying, Mew's gonna max guard here, I need to double this Mimikyu. Because if you hadn't doubled that Mimikyu, I think Jess has a very good shot at potentially getting game 2 back in her favor.
I would agree. That was the important call for game 2.
Yeah. So it was a pretty good set. Not a ton to say, though, other than what's kind of already been said, in my opinion. So.
All right, moving on. So game 3, we've got Raz against Dina. Looking at the team sheets here, the thing that sticks out as unexpected on Dina's side is obviously that Guzzlord. And then for Raz's side, for me it was a bit of the Trevenant, because everything else looks pretty standard and good into her team. But what do you have? Any thoughts on the 6? Anything that really stands out to you?
We can kind of talk more specific sets later. I think that these are a very flexible set of 6 Mons that we're seeing in front of us, despite how inflexible they're often treated. Neither Dina or Raz really were running, I would say, the standard versions of some of these sets. There was some pretty significant differences that actually played into the match a lot, and I actually think could have turned it in either favor had things been slightly different on either end. So I'm excited to talk about it.
All right, but looking at the match, so on Raz's side, Trevenant was very, very cool, and I think a really good call into Dina's team. Personally, as a little bit of a side tangent, I like the Grassed Ghost Trick Room setters more than just about everyone else in the league, especially Trevenant. I'm one of the few people that actively likes Trevenant. But
I'm getting sold on Trevenant.
Yeah.
This week, I have seen 2 Grass Ghosts really put in some work. And Trevenant also did pretty good work into me last week. So like I'm getting a little bit more sold on them than I used to be.
Yeah. But I was not sold on its speed stat this week because the Butterfree, at first I'm going through it, I'm like, oh, this has to be Iron Ball Butterfree because it's outspeeding the Trevenant in Trick Room, and then it's Focus Sash, and so there's some cognitive dissonance there. And yeah, I love Trevenant, I love the moves he had on it, and I think it had the potential to be really good this week, but I was not in love with that speed stat on it. I think if it's going to be one of your Trick Room answers, you need to make sure it's min speed. And I know this is something that has bothered Raz before, because I remember when we played in the VBA Season 2, he had a Sudowoodo that was not min-speed Sudowoodo, or it would have moved before a Glastrier on Trick Room turn, where Glastrier instead OHKO'd it without it moving. So I know that that's something that he tends to do, is probably overspeed things that should be min-speed in Trick Room. And that's something to definitely look at moving forward. I did think both sides had very interesting techs. You briefly mentioned that these are not the standard sets for these mons, like Special Metagross. I think awesome call this week, but what on Dina's side is going to have the best matchup into Special Metagross, like out of her entire set of 11 Pokemon? Probably Guzzlord, and Raz just didn't have an answer for it. So I thought they both made really good calls about how to beat the standard version of the other person's team, but the call that Raz had to make, which was just make the Metagross special, loses to the call that Dina made, which is I'm going to bring Guzzlord because that beats Metagross, no matter what set the Metagross is, for the most part. But I know there's some discussion about Guzzlord tiering, so I just wanted to have a brief little mention of that. So Guzzlord, out of the tier 3s, has one of the highest potential to just win a game by itself, but it also is going to have probably one of the lowest bring rates of any of them that get drafted, because it's so bad most of the time. Like, if your opponent's just teching like 2 Dazzling Gleams or something, So the bring rate is going to be low on it, but when it comes, if the opponent didn't prep enough for it, its game win rate is going to be high, if that makes sense. I know I didn't actually mention who won the match, but Dina won the match on the strength of her min-speed Butterfree and the Guzzlord set, which was a special Guzzlord, so Raz didn't really have a great answer for that. But I did think both of them prepped very well and played what was on the board well, but I do think Dina's prep beat Raz's good prep, if that makes sense. But what are your thoughts on the match?
Yeah, just a couple things. First off, it was kind of discussed a little, but I will reiterate it here just for everyone to hear. Make sure that you check your pastes. Raz should have had Gmax Grimmsnarl, which I've screwed up the Gmax versus non-Gmax before, no judgment here. And also, doing things like, I don't know if the paste was incorrect or if it was genned incorrectly, but always check your IVs, EVs, stuff like that before you play a set. It's really important to make sure that you kind of have everything lined up. And this is no flame on Raz. I'm partially responsible, honestly. I took a look at his stuff and was like, yeah, that's fine, and didn't look deep enough. So that's, it's one of those things you just have to be very careful about. And I'm kind of just saying that for all coaches. That's not just attack at Raz. I actually really like the Safeguard Trevenant. It's actually felt very good for stopgapping Butterfree from just like Sleep Powdering Marowak for free. That felt very good. I really like that was one of the tech options this week. And it's also good into the Hatterene, because if you're trying to use the Marowak in Trick Room against the Hat, you need to make sure that you have a way to make sure the Smite doesn't get you either, right? So having kind of like a double down where the Sleep Powder and the Confusion doesn't get in Marowak's way, I think is really cool. And he doesn't lose any item slots. Raz didn't actually end up running safety goggles on anything, because with the Safeguard, he felt pretty content with where he was at. I think Dina did a really nice job Max game one. I think for me, I was watching and I was like, it's very tempting to Max here, and she shouldn't, and she didn't, which I really like. Like, she kind of knew that she needed to go for that Melmetal. And I really thought that was good. One thing I do want to talk about with the Guzzlord. So there's two things here. One, if it was a physical Guzzlord, Raz actually potentially does have a shot that game too, if he plays his turn a little differently and if some things go a little differently. Because there's a world in which Raz burns a physical Guzzlord, which is what I would have done. I would have clicked Will-O-Wisp that turn 100% and probably switched Metagross out, or Max Guard it, or just protected it if I hadn't used Protect the prior turn. I don't remember the exact turn order there. In that kind of an instance, then he potentially has a good answer for it. That's part of the reason Will-O-Wisp was definitely on that Trevenant set, was for the Melmetal and the Guzzlord and that sort of thing, but it was special Guzzlord, so it worked out really well. And I really want to talk about that hat, because without that helping hand, I'm pretty much in agreement. Raz in his video is like, Guzzlord doesn't OHKO me, it's going to activate my policy, and then it helping hands, and then it KOs. And I'm pretty sure that was required. I think had Dina not brought helping hand Hatterene, that would not have happened. So really, really, really good tech, really good prep bringing helping hand hat, because that's not something you expect to see very often, because usually with a mon like Hat, it's like Trick Room, maybe Protect 2 attack, or Trick Room 3 attack, So seeing the helping hand there, I think really clinched her the game easy. One thing with Raz that I would like to give a note to is that whenever you're kind of leading, to me it was very unclear watching the replay back whether you wanted TR up or not at times. It was a little hard to tell what your game plan was for whether you wanted her to set TR for you or whether you didn't want TR for a game 2. It was just a little unclear on the replay, and I'm sure we can get some notes on that, but that was kind of one thing to make sure, is that especially when it comes to speed control in any match for any coach, is that you need to kind of go in with a plan for, if they lead this kind of speed control, here's how I want to deal with it, right? And I don't think we did Mon of the Week on the last one, so real quick, Mon of the Week for Dan versus Jess, because I don't think we did it. Dan's is obviously the Gourgeist. That thing had a really cool game 1. I think that's going to stick in my head for a while. For Jess, it was definitely the Mimikyu. It did a lot of work there. I thought it was really good. This week, I would say it was the Trevenant and the Guzzlord that were kind of the two big, most notable mons that are going to stick out in your head. Any other comments, Dan?
Nope, that sounds about right. You guys can see why we had ghosts as our theme of the
It's our
week.
theme. Yeah, lots of ghosts.
Lots of ghosts. Speaking of ghosts, why don't you talk us through this ghost matchup?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting game. This is Noah's first time not bringing the sand mode, which I think is really interesting in a lot of ways, because to me, I'm like, Marshadow's a problem. Marshadow's just a huge problem in Noah's team. So he brought a lot of stuff to kind of help him deal with that Marshadow. And he didn't go for his hail mode instead, or for his sand mode. Instead, he went more for his trick room mode, kinda. We'll get into that. Meanwhile, on Johnny's side, we are seeing that Rhyperior come out for the first time. Otherwise, it looks like kind of the 6 that I would expect into Noah's comp. It looks very solid. In the pre-game breakdown, you guys were talking about how good a lot of Johnny's team looked into Noah this week, and I was typically in agreement with that. And I think Noah going out of his box here was correct to an extent. I do think he could have made some things work, but this looks like a very good set of 6 potentially.
Yeah, I can agree with all of that. I do think John had a really good matchup on paper, but let's look at the match itself. Why don't you give us a little breakdown?
Yeah, so a couple of things I want to talk about because Johnny did kind of get some really cool stuff out this game. But before I talk about Johnny's cool stuff and some of those plays, I do actually want to talk about some things that I think Noah did that were really cool. The taunt Gengar was really good. A lot of people, I feel like, forget that Gengar gets taunt. But it's one of the fastest taunts in the game, and I think that sort of thing is very helpful. And like, even though Klefki will still get a priority move off, it is good to be able to click taunt into Klefki after the fact, and it's good into a lot of John's other Mons on his team, and can catch people off guard. Because I think a lot of people forget Gengar is actually a very good taunt Mon. They just kind of go, oh no, Gengar is going to kill this turn, or it's going to click Icy Wind or whatever. But Gengar's support move pool is as good as its offensive, in my opinion. It has a really nice toolkit, and it was cool to see the taunt. I also like the return of the Acid Armor Alcremie. Expecting the Thundurus to be physical off the bat seems a little risky to me, but I also think that you're not very pressured in that instance to not go for the Acid Armor, so I think if it was physical Thundurus, that was the correct turn 1 play. They both prepped for different team archetypes. Neither of them, it felt like, were playing against the team they expected to, but John's team was much more flexible, which is actually one of my things with Noah's team that got discussed a little bit in PRs, is that Noah's team has some pretty good flexibility and some good techs. I just talked about Taunt Gengar and some other stuff, but like, compared to kind of the depth of options that a team like Johnny's has that he abused this week, it felt like John was more able to adapt in the moment than Noah was able to. And now we kind of go into our what the hell John stuff. This will be a recurring segment, I'm sure, where I just list all the weird stuff Johnny did this week and talk about whether I think it was correct or not. So, first off, he had both Magic Room and Switcheroo on the Klefki. That made more sense to me the more I thought about it, because I was like, you actually might need your item on your other Mon next to you, and obviously you don't want to get rid of an air balloon on Klefki by clicking Magic Room. You know, you don't want to like give up your own item if Excadrill is about to max Quake Q, right? So makes sense there's both, but also it's super weird. And there was, I think the one turn he clicked Switcheroo, he should have just clicked Magic Room anyway, because he was like, oh, I'm worried about this Sash, and I was like, right, but you can just Magic Room that away and get rid of the berry you already know is there. I don't know, it was weird. It was cool, but
Wait.
I also feel
no,
like...
I disagree, because he still needs his weakness policy.
Oh yeah, he does need the weakness policy. But it was odd. I feel like you either drop the Magic Room or the Switch Room and make room for like... Because doesn't Klefki get Charm? Or something like that. I know
Reflect.
Yeah, I feel like you would have... To me, it was just odd because it felt like you had 2 move slots that were effectively doing very similar to almost the same thing. And I feel like there are other tech moves that might have been better there, but I don't know. That was just some very Johnny energy prep that I thought was cool. And I love Magic Room. I was super excited to see it actually used. Future Sight Gothitelle was so cool. That was my favorite thing this week in terms of Johnny's cool tech. Future Sight, a lot of people don't really realize, is a move that got like a bunch of buffs in Gen 8. It's like way stronger than it used to be. It's mostly used in singles though, because in doubles everything runs Protect. So you click Future Sight, and then like on turn 2 you're like, okay, I'm gonna click Protect now, and then it's fine. But Johnny was able to leverage that really well, because Noah didn't run Protect on all his mods. Johnny kind of knew that, and it let him play around Ally Switch in a really cool way. I think that was a really fantastic bit of prep on his end that really paid off in dividends. Just so you know, Rising Voltage doesn't get boosted into Gyarados. That's why it didn't KO. Because how Rising Voltage works is that, like, if the Pokemon is... Because I was asking you about this, because I was like, I'm 99% sure that Rising Voltage is never boosted. The reason is Gyarados is off the ground because it's the flying type. So because it's off the ground, you don't get the Rising Voltage boost from the electric terrain.
Yeah.
So
and
you probably...
On top of that,
Yeah.
Thundurus is also a flying type, so it doesn't get electric damage boost from the terrain either.
Yeah, so just run Thunderbolt in the future. That would be preferred for the future. That's just some good information.
Rising Voltage will get a
rules...
boost into grounded things. Like if he's a water type's there, Rising Voltage will do more damage, but water flying it will not.
Yeah, exactly. Just weird stuff. Terrain always confuses me. Anytime I have any questions about terrain, I immediately go to the internet and start looking stuff up, because terrain's just weird. But it's something both of us noticed, so I just thought, hey, I'd say something. The Weather Ball was very hype. Getting that Weather Ball kill on that Marowak was cool, and it was definitely a bit of good tech that showed. So what do you got, Dan?
Yeah, first thing, shout out to Johnny for getting his speed tiers, what I think was much more correct this week after watching Weavile outspeed Marshadow last week. He'd mentioned multiple times he knew what the speeds were and that he felt locked because of it. So I thought that was great adjustment week over week. Calling the ally switch and protecting, that's probably usually the right play. Like he played in a way that he couldn't get punished, whether or not there was an ally switch, so I think that's correct for a Pokemon that often carries it, like Porygon 2. The close combat Leer play,
that was cool.
I wasn't sold on it as I was watching it happen, but the more I thought about it, the more it sounds right, because you never attack into the Hitmontop there because you think you're going to survive that. You always attack into the Thundurus. So getting off the Leer to make sure the close combat takes it down, I think was the correct call, and just very cool when watching it. And then assuming that you think that there's going to be the sand mode, having that Weather Ball Rain Dance was very, very good tech to counter multiple aspects of it. So I thought John had some very good prep this week, and I thought Noah played very well with what he had, but his matchup was just so rough this week, and I thought he did his best to try and center it around Gyarados, which is why that's my Mon of the Week for him, because that was his best answer into a lot of John's stuff, but John just had so much. When Gyarados is your best answer into a Thundurus team, you have a rough matchup. What do you...
No, I think Noah did pretty well this week.
Yeah.
Despite it being a -5. I mean, the matchup was rough. Johnny is a wild card player, and I think that he also prepped this really well. So this was a good game for sure, and I really think it showed just kind of how Red Division has been so far this season. Is that currently Dina is in the lead, and with a pretty respectable lead. But to me, it feels like Red Division right now is like everybody's just kind of taking games off each other very wildly, and it feels like it's still very open in week 3, which is nice. That's how it should be. I don't think anyone is... I mean, Dina is currently our only undefeated coach in the division, I believe, but it doesn't feel like... I don't believe Dina's going to run away undefeated all season. I think that there will be good competition throughout this, so I'm very excited to see how things play out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, she's got some rough matchups coming up in the coming weeks, starting this week, so we'll see how she's able to handle that, but that will come in the pregame pretty soon.
Oh, hi, puppy. Also. But yeah, no, I'm excited for Dina to wreck you this week, and then I can roast you all next week.
Yeah, we'll see.
So that is all for this week. Hope you all enjoyed. We'll be seeing you next week with another breakdown. Bye.
Have a nice one. Bye.